Cars is a movie where a race car learns the meaning of humbleness and family. Cars 2 is a spy movie where racing is involved in an evil conspiracy to make oil seem like the best fuel option. Cars 3 is just straight about racing, and it feels weird that it took 3 movies to get there. Sure, Planes was the first and only other sports movie in the world of Cars, but Planes was not a good movie, so it doesn't count. Cars 3, on the other hand, is probably the second best movie in the world of Cars. For those of you that don't know, Cars 3 is a movie about Lightning McQueen, after years of successes, realizing he's too old to race against the new rookies, and training his replacement. Of course, it takes the entire movie for him to realize he needs to retire, and he only kind of retires, but still. The reason I would call it the only sports movie in the Cars trilogy is because the entire movie is actually about him preparing, or I guess him preparing his trainee for the big race at the end of the movie. The finale is the race at the end of the movie, but not in the way Cars had a race as the finale. In Cars, the race was the finale because it hit the emotional beats of his friends coming to support him, and him showing he cared about other people more than himself. In Cars 3, the finale is about winning the race. What's also interesting about Cars 3 is that this is not a sequel to Cars 2. Now, admittedly, it would be very weird for Cars 3 to have anything to do with spying and what happened in Cars 2, but the writers seem to be actively trying to avoid anything to do with Cars 2. Now, this is understandable, as Cars 2 is a terrible movie, but I find it interesting just how much of a sequel to Cars, rather than Cars 2, this movie is. Besides the fact that none of the characters that were introduced in Cars 2 are seen or even mentioned in Cars 3, they even bring back some characters that were missing from Cars 2. Lightning's sponsors, Rusty's, make an appearance as faithful sponsors that have had Lightning's back this entire time. And the owners even sell the company to a big corporate guy just because they want Lightning to succeed. Considering they were practically a joke in the original Cars, it's nice to see them get some respect. Doc Hudson, Lightning's mentor in Cars 1, doesn't return as a character, but still manages to be a major part of the plot. Chick Hicks, the villain of Cars 1, even returns as a talk show host whose only claim to fame is the fact that he won the Grand Prix back in Cars 1, and is still trying to ride that hype train that doesn't exist anymore. And frankly, didn't exist in the first place given that everyone hated him for winning that race. I think that's really fun. They even call back to the beginning of Cars at the beginning of Cars 3 by having it start with Lightning saying, "I am speed in the darkness." It really does feel like a sequel written 10 years after the first that is trying to call back to all the things of the first movie. But I don't mind it that much. But Cars 3 is most interesting because it's part of a style of movie that's come into more prominence in the past decade. A type of movie I call the old man sequel. An old man sequel is a movie that takes place a decent amount of time after the first few movies, where the main characters have gotten old, and is usually about ushering in a new generation, because keeping the franchise alive is the most important thing in this age. A couple of examples of this are Terminator Dark Fate, Halloween 2018, Tron Legacy, Blade Runner 2049, Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull, Hawkeye, and even the Star Wars sequel trilogy. Now, admittedly, I haven't watched most of those, and the ones I have I barely remember, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. However, Cars 3 does things a little differently than would be expected. Let's take Hawkeye, because I actually know it pretty well. In Hawkeye, Clint Barton is still very good at what he does, and the retirement is more about him finally being able to just spend time with his family and live his life instead of going out adventuring all the time. In Cars 3, the reason Lightning's retiring is because he's too old and washed up. He's not a bad racer, but he's definitely not good enough to continue as he did. Also, in Hawkeye, Clint Barton very clearly is supposed to act as a mentor to the plucky newcomer, Kate Bishop, and she's already incredibly good at what she does because having the newcomer start at step 1 would just be inconceivable. However, in Cars 3, the plucky newcomer, named Cruz Ramirez, is supposed to be Lightning's mentor during the entire movie, giving him new training methods that they use on younger, better cars, which gives her a much better excuse than most newcomer characters for being incredibly good at what they do. But that's not the reason Lightning isn't the mentor at first. I suspect the real reason is that Lightning is not the kind of character that can be a mentor. And also, though he's gotten older, he hasn't actually grown up. In Cars 1, Lightning learned to be a good person. However, his base character, a hot-headed, or should I say hot-engined, smack-talking guy that thinks he knows better than everyone else, was still there. I appreciated some of that because it showed that though he had become a better car, he was still clearly Lightning. The problem is not only that Lightning is older now and should have changed at least a little bit, but also that part of Cars 1 was him learning that he's not better than everyone and still has a lot to learn. Doc Hudson taught him that because Doc did know more than Lightning. So Lightning still thinking he knows better than everyone is a degradation of his character. But Lightning has grown up a little bit, and the beginning of Cars 3 shows that, while also showing some odd things about his fans. The big thing at the beginning of the movie is Lightning's relationship with his racing rivals and how different they are from the other two Cars movies. In Cars 1, Lightning has two main rivals, the King and Chick Hicks. Chick Hicks is the worst and no one likes him, including Lightning. But Lightning definitely has a massive amount of respect for the King. This makes sense as the King is an older racer and Lightning was probably a massive fan of him before he started racing himself. Then again, I'm not sure if you could call the King a rival considering Lightning literally pushes him across the finish line at the end of Cars. Lightning's dynamic with his rival in Cars 2, Francesco, might seem similar to his dynamic with Chick Hicks at first, but that's mostly because Francesco starts off as just an annoying, full of himself race car. But Francesco has a bit more personality than that, and while he's still a mildly annoying rival throughout the movie, he does have some kindness, as shown when he kind of comforts Lightning when he's missing Mater. And the two do seem to have respect for each other as they have a final, casual race at Radiator Springs. Lightning's dynamic with his two rivals at the beginning of Cars 3 is even better, as they actually seem just like friends who race against each other, which makes sense as they've been racing against each other for a long time. This is my favorite dynamic in the Cars trilogy, and I like how Lightning's rivalries seem to become less and less personal as the movies go on. Until we get to the main rival for Cars 3, but that's besides the point. The other thing we see at the beginning of Cars 3 is how Lightning's fans are doing, and they're not doing well, which is weird. Lightning's seemingly biggest fans are the twins, a pair of cars that are always together and are always rooting for Lightning, and have apparently abandoned Lightning, as they are nowhere to be seen. They've always kind of been fickle fans, so I guess it kind of makes sense that they wouldn't be there. Especially since Lightning's fans seem to be kind of the worst. This makes some sense if you look at it as the fans following in Lightning's footsteps and also not growing up. But they explicitly animate cars being annoyed at Lightning's fans, including Mater. And for good reason, too. They just kind of push vehicles and things out of the way in order to get a view. It just feels like a weird artistic choice when showing Lightning in his prime. The other oddity about Lightning's fans is that most of the new supporting characters seem to be massive fans of Lightning too. Jackson Storm, a rookie and Lightning's new rival for the movie, was a big fan of Lightning's when he was younger and is also a horrible person. He's full of himself and has the innate ability to really get into your head and make you feel bad about yourself, causing you to lose focus and not do as well. And I have no evidence for this, but I have a feeling he was inspired by how Lightning acted when he was a rookie before his change of heart in Cars 1. Lightning's new boss was also a fan of Lightning, and is now trying to force him to retire. So, between them and all the fans we see of Lightning, it seems that Lightning's fans are generally bad people. Not all of them, as Cruz was also a fan and was inspired by Lightning when she was a kid, but most of them. So, fine. Lightning has most of the same flaws he did in Cars 1, because that way they didn't have to try as hard to make him have character development. So, how does Lightning become a mentor to Ramirez if she's supposed to be mentoring him, and he doesn't seem to be able to mentor anyone? Well, they just use Doc Hudson again. Now, sadly, Paul Newman, who played Doc in Cars, died before Cars 2, so they don't use him directly. Instead, the movie becomes a celebration of Doc Hudson. Now, of course, I have no problem with the movie being a celebration of Doc, and I do kind of like the idea of using the mentor of the main character to inspire the mentoring of the replacement character, kind of showing Lightning following in the footsteps of Doc. But I feel at least part of the reason they did this is because they didn't know how to make Lightning the same car, but more mature, which isn't great. So how do they celebrate Doc Hudson in Cars 3? Well, there's 3 main ways they do it. 1. Lightning tells Ramirez a thing about racing that Doc told him. The classic is turn right to go left, which has something to do with drifting. I don't know anything about drifting, so I have no idea if it's a legitimate thing, but it's one of the classic lines from Cars. The second is with flashbacks and dream sequences with Doc in them. The third, and a main part of the movie, is meeting Doc's old racing partners and having them train Lightning and Ramirez and gush about how amazing Doc was. These are all good. Doc's old racing partners gushing about how amazing Doc was might seem like it would be annoying, but they actually do a really good job of it, so it feels good instead of annoying. The annoying part comes with how it all ends. See, Lightning does not finish the race in the finale. Because while the movie is clearly about training Ramirez, remember, she's the trainer that was training Lightning to race better. She even gets pushed off for even thinking she could be a racer by her boss. So Lightning does race until the last stretch of the race, where he realizes he's losing, and the only way his number, 95, is going to win is if Ramirez replaces him in the middle of the race. So she does, and wins. Now, you may think that that's stupid and probably not allowed, and yes, but you see, they hand wave it away in a similar manner that Airbud waves away the problem with a dog playing baseball, by saying the number is signed up, not the person, so it's perfectly allowed. That, along with Chick Hicks seeming to never get in trouble for literal car abuse in Cars, makes you really wonder if maybe they should have some more rules for seemingly the biggest sport in the world of cars. I have mixed feelings about this climax. The movie is constantly building up to one last race for Lightning, and then he isn't even able to finish it. It almost seems to spit in the face of the first Cars movie, in which Lightning literally pushes the king over the finish line because, as Lightning says, he deserves to finish his last race. But apparently Lightning isn't allowed that privilege. Though, again, apparently it won't be his last race, but it pretty much is. Now, I think I would have been fine if Ramirez had taken the race right from the beginning, as she is the superior racer by the end of the movie, and it has been partially about her being a racer instead of a trainer. But they distract from that emotional ending by having this switcheroo in the middle of the race. So instead, we get the worst of both worlds, and just have it be pretty unsatisfying. However, they do manage to make it a bit more satisfying, with Lightning calling back to Cruz's methods of training and other things that happened in the movie when he gives her advice during the race, which I do think is nice. So, I'm not really sure how I feel about it, which is pretty much my entire opinion of this movie. I'm not sure how I feel about it. I have a lot of issues with it, and it gets hard to watch sometimes, but the ending is mostly really well done, and it does manage to leave you with a good feeling, which is important. I think I like it, but I'm not sure.